because we had more registrations. But let's start with us. So welcome to our first session for transforming research into impact.
I'm Konstantinos.
And I'm Natalie. We are from the Innovation and Development Directorate, and we will guide you through today's agenda and our plans also for future events to transform research into impact at the CYI.
Before we begin, Natalie will share a few words about the IDD team and what we do at the Directorate.
So our team has, hi. Our team has 6 members. Our director, Konstantinos Kleovoulou, myself, and Elisa Lukaidou, who are senior officers, Konstantinos and Anna Margaritova, who are innovation officers, and even though Yorgos Georgiou is somewhere in the Alps, he is also our business analyst at the team. So our mission at the IDD is to support our researchers in every possible way. So we are committed to providing the resources, the guidance, the assistance, anything that you need to transform your research into impactful solutions. So our goal is to help navigate the complexities of your work, ensuring that your research not only advances knowledge, which is your primary target, but also creates meaningful real-world impact. So our job, the reason of our existence at the CYI, is to help you transform your research into impact.
As Natalie mentioned in her opening statement, this today's session is part of a 3-series dynamic events which are designed for you, for our researchers and innovators, to help you, to inspire you and empower you. Today we will focus on intellectual property. The next session will focus on entrepreneurship and will help you to understand how you can turn innovative ideas into successful ventures. And the third event will focus on industrial engagement, so how you can successfully build collaborations between academia and industry so that you can drive what we call real-world impact.
But for now, the first session, as Konstantinos said, focuses on intellectual property, and we have with us Dr. Phyllis Lias-Spesser, who will address the challenging question of why commercialize your research. So she will also moderate a one-on-one discussion with 3 esteemed members of our community.
Concerning this one-on-one discussion, first on stage we'll have our president, Professor Stavros Malas, who through a series of questions will discuss the Institute's approach to IP commercialization, including its importance, challenges, and strategies for fostering a culture that integrates it into research and education while balancing at the same time open access and IP protection. Then we'll have the head of the IDD, Dr. Konstantinos Kleovoulou, who, again, through a series of questions, will reflect on the CYI's IP portfolio and discuss support mechanisms that we have in place and other strategies for enhancing collaboration to drive successful IP commercialization internally. And finally, Professor George Priskos, who is who will provide the researchers and innovators' perspective on aligning motivations, research goals, and timelines with CYI's IP and commercialization objectives. And this would be the end of the one-on-one discussions segment of today's event. And then online we will have our IP expert and patent attorney, Mr. Elliot De Tullio, who will provide insights on the topic of IP management and commercialization. Finally, we will close today's event with our very own Anna Margaritova, who will present the IP at the Cyprus Institute. Afterward, join us outside for bites and drinks. Thank you.
So we will hope to have an engaging session and an interactive also session. So feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, and have a lively discussion with our experts. So our first speaker for today, Dr. Phyllis Lias-Besser, who will answer the question about why commercialize research. Even though we know her, I'm going to read a couple of words about you. No, it's okay, stay with me. Even though we all know her, I'm just going to do a brief introduction about her. Lias-Besser is a former AI researcher and professor who founded Foresight Science and Technology, today an 80-person international consultancy firm that has helped thousands of clients raise billions of US dollars commercializing their technology. She holds a PhD, a JD from State University of New York at Buffalo, and is a registered technology transfer professional, a certified new product development professional, a US certified emergency medical technician, and a US Forest Service certified wildland firefighter. Her eclectic career has taken her from being a cowgirl on a Montana cattle ranch to the point person for the science community on the US budget as a registered lobbyist in Washington, D.C., to being one of the founders of a modern practice for technology transfer, to being a visiting professor at multiple universities in the US, Russia, and Germany, an owner of a redwood tree plantation in California, and finally to being here with us as a senior consultant for technology and commercialization expert for the Research and Innovation Foundation of Cyprus. So thank you, Dr. Besser. We have your presentation. Oh, the stage is yours.
Well, I have to say your acronym, CYI, is appropriate because what I'm talking about is considering your impact. So, did we open the right one? I'm not sure if we opened the first presentation or the second one. No, we went the second one. Hold on. I apologize. I redid all of this the other day because I was bored with giving the same talk all the time. I don't know how many of you have that. I may need a, there we go. There it is. Okay. Nope, that's not it either. How do I get down? Can you give me a hand here? I'm so used to, oh, it is a touch screen. Oh, good, that makes it easier. There we are, version 2. Okay, that should do it. Oops, why isn't that doing it? Come on. I'd like to tell people, years ago when I was young, I walked into the office of the Vice President for Research, this is the right one, for Research and Development, and Chief Scientist of Martin Marietta, which was a big defense firm. And I had my compact computer, old people will remember what compacts are. And I set it on the desk and I opened it up to do my little talk for him. He said, shut it, now we'll see if you know it. So that was an important lesson. The second lesson is if they invite you to stay for sandwiches, you're going to get the contract. So remember that one too. Anyways, why do you commercialize? Why do we even care about this? This is why. Look at this. This is the average GDP spent on research in the EU. This is Cyprus. It's pretty disgusting when you think about it. Not a lot of percentage of the GDP going to you guys and everybody else who does research here, which tells us you're not serving the public. Because if you were important to them, they would devote more. But obviously, they don't get it. So you have to say to yourself, how do we make this happen that we can increase that percentage? And impact is the way we make it happen. Now, you're better than a lot of the other institutions here because you're more applied and you're more focused. But as a community, the academic community in Cyprus is still caught up in the research promotion stage and not the research and innovation stage. And this is unfortunate because when we think about what it means to do science, we forget what science is really about. How many of you use an experimental method when you do science? Raise your hand. Do you know why the experimental method was developed? Anybody know why it was developed or who developed it? It was developed by an Englishman named Francis Bacon. All science before then was observational. It was Aristotelian science. You sit down and you look at the world and you say, you know, that's how the world works. Bacon said we have a problem. If we want to create a better world, we have to rethink how we do science. And the way we rethink it is we need to develop ways of intervening in the world. What is the experimental method? It is a way of intervening in natural processes and changing them. And if it works and if it is replicable, we can do it again and again and again and do things with that information and that knowledge we gain. And that is why Bacon said, knowledge is power, which you may have heard before. It's not from politics, it's actually about science. So, that's why you commercialize. That's why you create impact, because if you want this percentage of the overall government budget to go up here, you have to create benefit for people, or why would they give you their tax dollars? It's about bags of groceries, in a sense, as we saw in the recent American election, where Donald Trump was surprisingly elected. And you got Kennedy in now at NIH, who doesn't believe in vaccines. I mean, it's crazy. But obviously, the American people don't really understand the beneficial impact of science. So that's what we're trying to address. How do you commercialize? Good news for you. You don't have to worry about it. Not your problem. My problem, her problem, his problem. You do good science. The commercialization is other people's jobs. But I'm going to explain how you can help it. Help us do this. One way you do that is you think about what you're doing and what might be its impact. So if, for example, you are a researcher interested in ion mobility, sounds pretty fundamental, doesn't it? But ion mobility is critical for developing paints that will allow us to capture solar energy by painting houses in Cyprus. So we don't have to rely upon gas, we don't have to rely upon oil, we don't have to rely upon coal, but we would be a net exporter of electricity, and nobody would ever pay for electricity again. That's the kind of impact fundamental research can have. Am I asking you to think about how I do all this transition? No, I'm just asking you to think a little bit about where's this going? Who might use it? And why might it be helpful? What kinds of problems can it solve? Because that will inform how you construct your experiment and the kind of equipment you develop. And that's the stuff we commercialize, the result of your experiments and the equipment you develop. That's the technology that comes out of your work. This is, by the way, generated by AI. When I first heard about DALL-E, years ago, I was sitting with my partner, who you know, and Basilis knows, and we were saying, I wonder if it really works. And we said, let's make a grizzly bear. And I was like, let's make it more challenging. We'll make a grizzly bear eating strawberries. And she said, the grizzly bear should be in a restaurant. And that's what we got. So that's fundamental AI research becoming practical in a weird way. Okay, what research makes a difference? It's got to be useful. If nobody can use a research result, who can? I'm not talking about the advancement of knowledge now. That's a valid and important thing. But from a commercialization standpoint, if nobody can figure out how to use it, who cares? That's number one. So it's got to be useful. Just like I described how ion mobility can be useful. And I'll show you a couple of other examples in a minute. It's more than useful. It's got to be usable. In other words, something that is useful for you in a lab is not commercializable. It has to be matured so that it can be taken and used in a practical application. Got to be developed further, and that's what makes it usable. And the third thing it has to be, and you'll like this, it's got to be publishable. If your work isn't publishable, it's probably not going to be commercializable. Anybody know why? It's not unique. It's been done before. The things that go from research institutes to commercialization are new things. You can't protect something that's not new and unique and non-obvious. Well, you can sort of, but you're not going to get a patent for it. You can't protect it with a patent. There's other ways of protecting things. So if you can't publish it, it won't ultimately be easy to commercialize. Now, we're talking about downstream, not tomorrow, obviously. If it's unique, publishable, a development, write up a disclosure. Because the second you write up that disclosure, you document its existence, you have just created intellectual property. It's come out of your head, it's now tangible, you can touch it, it's real. It's a bunch of electrons maybe, but it's not in your head, it's out. And at that moment, you and whoever's involved in that invention, that creation, that whatever that goes in the disclosure should sit down and figure out who contributed what percentage of share to it. Because if you don't, somebody else is going to figure it out for you. And you're the only ones who were there who really knows what was happening. So that's why it's better you figure it out among yourselves at the time you make the invention. Later, everybody's like, well, there's money involved. You know, it warps perspective sometimes. But if you do it at that moment, it's easy to do it. And my advice to people I work with, and I've been doing this for over 45 years, is if the inventors can't figure it out, everybody gets an equal share. Because the rest of us were not there, and we don't know how to be fair, other than to say, if you can't figure it out, don't ask us to figure it out. I want to add one other thing. How you protect it as IP is a tactical decision. So don't be upset if your organization says, we don't want to patent this. We're going to protect it as trade secret. That's your know-how. We're going to protect it in other ways. We don't think it's patentable or it's not going to return enough investment to make it worthwhile paying for patenting. There's a lot of ways to protect IP, a lot of ways to get it to market. The easiest way to get IP to the market is know-how through a consulting contract. When you do a consulting contract, somebody's buying your IP. That's why they're hiring you to consult. It's your know-how. And know-how is trade secret. Unless you disclose it to them, in which case they now have the know-how also. Okay. The other thing is protecting IP can be done very quickly. I can literally give you a patent priority date in 1 day. Takes me 1 day in the worst case scenario. What I do is I take your paper that you give me, your disclosure, something, I look at it and I file a US provisional patent, poof, I have a priority date. So if somebody tells you, oh, it hangs up publishing, not true. Now, there are all sorts of problems with just taking a paper and throwing it in, but that's the worst case. And the reason for that is it will set a constraint on what can be covered in a patent downstream to have that same date. But that's technicalities we don't have to get into today. Point is, we've been doing this for years in the US. Nobody's not publishing because US universities, US research institutes are protecting their IP. Since some of you may not be clear what IP is just property. This is a plot. There's some buildings on it. You see this here? That's the plot. That's called the metes and bounds of the plot in law. That's a piece of property. I can define it. When you file that disclosure, you've just defined your piece of property. You have defined what your IP is. Now, just like in a house, you can say, oh, I'm going to lease it. I'm not going to live in it. I'm going to rent out a room. I'm going to lease it for 2 years. I'm going to rent a room for 3 years, 1 day, 1 month. You can cut up IP in all sorts of ways, slice and dice it however you want. Typically, we slice and dice it by field of use in geography. and time. Different IPs last for different times. But the point is, it's nothing different than a tangible piece of property other than it comes out of your head versus being on the ground or a machine that you can buy in the store. Now, to be protected, you have to take proactive steps. Number one, if you come up with an interesting invention, don't tell the whole world about it. File the disclosure, figure out how you're going to protect it before you tell the whole world. Because if you tell the whole world about it, I'm telling all my students, my mother, my grandmother, this is Cyprus. The President of the Republic will know in 2 days. You know? Everybody's going to know about it, and you have just disclosed it publicly, and you can't patent something that's been disclosed publicly. So stop, don't talk about it, file a disclosure. They'll give you an NDA statement you can use with other people, non-disclosure agreement, so you can release it to them, and that bounds them to keep it a secret so you can get a patent. It's not that you can't talk about it, but you have to establish that you own it before you talk about it. It has to be able to be described in sufficient detail to use or copy. Doesn't matter whether you're making this photograph, which is copyrighted by its mere existence and cannot be copied without permission, or a great invention of a new machine or a new way to do AI or whatever. It's got to be unique, and it's got to be in such a way that you can describe it so somebody can copy it. Here's the new, interesting, it's got to be novel. And it's got to be a subject matter recognized by law, because you can't patent or copyright laws of nature, mathematical formulas, la-di-da-di-da. In many countries, you cannot patent software. You have to protect it in other ways. However, in some countries, you can protect it. Whoops. You can protect it. La-da. I've never stripped in one of these presentations before. You can protect databases and so on. As I said before, you can slice and dice it. How do you secure IP? Well, you don't have to worry about this. His job, her job is to worry about that. There's a lot of ways. That's what I want you to get across. Don't just think patents. We can go into it in detail if anybody actually cares. I was an IP law professor. I can bore you out of your mind. If you're concerned about who owns your inventions and creations, go to my blog. I have a bunch of stuff there for people on how to deal with this. But the bottom line is this. If you invented in connection with your work here, it's a work for hire, I'm willing to bet, because you're hired to be a researcher, and part of being a researcher is to invent things. So you're probably, anything you do here at the Institute, use the Institute's equipment, you use the Institute's machinery. It's connected with something you did, but you're at home sitting on the john, and all of a sudden you're like, Eureka, still belongs to the Institute because it's associated with your work. On the other hand, you're working here as a research scientist, and you're driving your car, and you say, by dingy, I have a better idea on how to make the blinker in the car. Probably not related to your work unless it's something very closely related to the work. So that one you own. That's the bottom line. Is it related to your work or not? Here's not necessarily my favorite thing, but one of the more significant things I commercialized in a great story. You know what heart attacks are? You know, people have heart attacks from clots. I'm an emergency medical technician in my retirement. I'm sitting in a lecture from a guy who runs a STEMI lab at one of the hospitals we transport to, because our medical director brings in people from hospitals to let us know what happens to the patients we carry in the ambulance after we drop them off. And this guy is talking about what happens in his STEMI lab, and he says, you know, he showed us this. He said, this is the most significant thing that has come into the STEMI lab in my career. And it came from a small company. What it is, in the US we call them roto-rooters. They clean out pipes. They're little spinning wheels and they put it down in drain pipes and they clean it out. Somebody said, let's make a roto-rooter that goes down arteries. That was the invention. Came from a university. Went to a small company that commercialized it. He said the name of the company. I'm like, dang, that sounds familiar. I know I've heard that, and I've heard that company's name before. So my company, like everybody, has an online presence, and we have a cloud thing, and I go onto the cloud, and I go into the files, and I search our archives, and I pull up a report using the name of the company. And I pull up a report, and my name's on the report. And it was like 20 years, 10, 20, I forget how long ago it was, but it was a long time ago. I was involved in moving this from the university into their company. Now, did I invent it? No, somebody like you did that. Did I commercialize it? No, somebody in the company did that. Or did the hard work of it. Did I make it? No, I didn't do anything. I'm just the nail that just happened to be there. And if I wasn't there, maybe somebody else would have been. But I was there. And I saved a heck of a lot of people by being there. You can do the same equivalent thing in your research. It may not be saving people. It may be helping the ecosystem. It may be finding somebody in search and rescue. It can be any kinds of things. I've seen a lot of, could be keeping a building, an old building safe, with some of the stuff that I've seen in that lab. It's a variety of things. But you can have a major impact, not immediately, but over time it happens. If you think about these kinds of things and you support it. Here's an example of something that's not worth patenting. I was the tech transfer director at the University of Rhode Island. We have large marine sciences president. I assume it's still there. We did at that time, large marine sciences program. And somebody was like, we would really like to track whales. And right now we're putting things on them, and if nobody sees it on a boat, it doesn't work. The little clip on the fin. Why don't we put a little transmitter there, go up into space, come down, and we could ping them every time they come up. So they made one and it worked. And you could track a whale or a dolphin or whatever marine mammal you wanted to track. And it cost about $50,000 US to make one of them, and then they got it down to about $25,000. After a while, they got good at it. And they were saying, can we patent this? Can we do anything with that? I looked at it and I said, I don't think it's worth it. We're not going to make it, how many people want to track marine mammals? So instead what happened was, the way we commercialized this is every year they would send a email out, or a letter, we start with letters and went to email, out to every researcher who was involved in marine mammal research saying, are you looking for trackers? We have these trackers. We can make them cheaper than you can, and ours are proven. And we're happy to make them for you. And they supported a technician who made the trackers, plus a student, an undergraduate who helped, and they generated enough money to support a postdoc. So that lab picked up a free postdoc by commercializing that, and that kind of research today helps avoid marine mammals being caught in nets and people being sunk when orcas get pissed when they're going through a strait. You may have read about that, but that's how you do that now. So you can see even small things can be commercialized. This one is very cool. I was really proud of that one. So when you get involved in commercialization, what do you as a researcher want to know? And you don't have to figure this all out yourself, but these are the kinds of things you want to know. What is it? Is it a material? Is it a process? Is it a machine? What is it that you think you have created or invented? It's a work of art. And there are some things that I've seen come out of here that would qualify as work of art. It's a social science methodology. All that stuff can be commercialized. Where's it used? Who might put their hands on it? Why would they use it? Typically, they want to use it because of three things. It performs in a certain way. It has a price they can afford. It's easy to use. Actually, fourth thing. And the fourth thing is oomph, which you'll never find in the literature unless you're reading one of my things. Oomph is what makes you buy it today versus tomorrow. You go to the supermarket and you look at what's there and you say, I really would like an apple. I'll buy apples instead of grapes. Oomph. That's oomph. Or I'll buy apples instead of candy. Oomph. So it's not just competing against other things, it's competing against however else you could spend your money. Performance, typically there's 3 or 4 things people keep in mind. You go buy a car, you think about what's important to me. You don't think about who made the tires. That's not important to you. Just give me good tires. Tires good enough. You think, is it an SUV because I have kids? Is it a sports car because I'm single and I like driving fast? You know, is the color nice, whatever. So on. Price, price is typically a matter of sticker shock. If you're buying a car, you're in one price bracket. If you're buying an apple, you're obviously in a different price bracket. Does it seem to fit? Okay. Is it unique? We've talked about that. Forget it. Is it better? It can be unique and not better. Savannah River Laboratory in the U.S. had a problem. They had these big drums of chemicals left over from nuclear research and making bomb material, and they were leaking. And they wanted to know what was in them, so they invented a 3D X-ray machine to try and figure out what was in there. And they were like, oh, we're going to commercialize this in sports medicine. And we looked at them and we said, are you serious? Because they thought, you know, when the football player goes down, you know, and the docs and them, or whoever runs out in the field, they would carry this little X-ray device and X-ray the person very quick. And you're like, no, I don't think so. Not going to happen that way. Too much delay of game. They're going to take that person out. They might use it someplace else, but they're not using it on the field. We thought there was a great application in avocados. Because when they bring avocados in from the border from Mexico into California, where they also grow avocados, there is sometimes a worm in the seed of the avocado, and it's a pest, and they don't want to bring it in California. We found we could not commercialize it that way because hand labor was cheaper. They could take these Mexican immigrants who would work for nothing and have them look at the, oh, there's a hole in the avocado. It wasn't worthwhile mechanizing it. Human labor was cheaper. So there's always some other way of doing things. The question is what you have better. You also want to know, does it infringe? Was it already invented out there? Are you infringing somebody else's patent? Can you protect it? And again, from the standpoint of a licensee, who might want it and why? And you look at those and you say, oh God, those are complicated questions. Number one, you don't have to worry about it. They worry about this kind of stuff, not you. You file a disclosure. Number two, we're very fortunate in that we have all these kinds of tools today, which you may have seen, and there's tricks in using them. But you can get answers to all those questions by just using these open source free softwares. And what you do is you put it in the question in one, you see the answer, then you put the question in the next one, you put the question in the next one, see if they align. All you're trying to, you got to think of an AI tool as a stupid graduate assistant or undergraduate research assistant that you're sending to the library to get something. So you have to have a conversation with them. This is for IP only in scholarly literature. But you have these conversations with them and you say, well, that seems kind of reasonable, or that doesn't, and you feed it back. And after a while, you get someplace and you say, okay, that gives me a feel. Now I'm going to dive deep and see if this is really the case. But the first level is just, does it seem like there's something there? What they're going to do originally when they get your disclosures, they're going to say, does it seem like there's something there that we can move with and it's worthwhile pursuing? And that's one way you do this. The other way you do it is you go to the CKTO, which I'm the program manager for. You file an application and we figure it all out for you. And we go deep there. This is what your KTO needs to know. Can you describe it? If you can't describe what you think is your invention in a sentence or two, you probably don't understand it. If you can't describe it, draw a picture. You ever seen patents? There's pictures in patents. That's why. So if you can't explain it so that a reasonable layperson can understand it, doesn't work. Forget it. Never going to go to market. Has to be a market. There's a market for the little sensor on the wheel. There's a market for the STEMI tool, Roto-Rooter. Doesn't have to be a big market, but somebody, there has to be a market out there that somebody will pay for to commercialize it. Even if you invent a better shelter for refugees that's used by the UN Refugee High Commission, there's a market for it because they are going to pay somebody to make those shelters. So there's still money changing hands. It doesn't have to be commercial. It can be nonprofit social do-gooding. We have to understand what their market is. We have to understand what you got, why it's better, why anybody should really care, and why you are the best people in the world to work with. That's the value proposition. And we have to be able to show somebody a business model so how they can either make money on it if they're for-profit or how they can afford it if they're non-profit. Which is to say it has to have some potential for economic value or nobody's going to touch it. It's the reality of the world. And if you can check that box, then this is nice to have social and environmental value as well. But if you can't check the first box, you're not going to get to the second box. Give you a concrete example. I did a technology a few years ago, many years ago because I've been in management for many years, which was a better way of dealing with tachycardia on the heart. And we went to look at it, and it turns out the current method was 98.5% effective with almost no risk. And this was like 99% effective with low risk, probably the equivalent risk, but unproven. You are now a patient. I'm going to give you something with 98.5% success rate that has been used for the past 20 years or something new, where you might get a 0.5% improvement. Which would you choose? Yeah, that's a proven one. It's just not enough of a bang for the buck to make it worthwhile. So that's an example of what I mean. It has to be an appropriate stage of development in order to be commercialized. In other words, if you have something very, I figured out how to wiggle a quanta. You know about quantum pairs? Quantum pairs? Anybody know about quantum pairs? Wiggle one here, wiggles over there. I actually saw that invention. It was very cool. My staff brought it to me, and they're like, what are we going to do with this? This is so early stage. And I looked at it, and I went, I'm a Trekkie. Anybody a Trekkie? Star Trek? Anybody see Star Trek? You know what Star Trek is? When they go like this, beam me up, Scotty? Quantum wiggling is the basis for beam me up, Scotty. It literally is. It's only, 300 years and a bunch of different inventions along the way, and we can do it. But, that was my first reaction was, oh my God, you actually can beam somebody up. But anyways, that won't work. So we began to look for something that was more appropriate where we could see a transition and the initial thing we latched onto was security. Because if you don't have the pairs right, you can tell a transmission is not valid. And then quantum computing was another one. It's got to be able to be scaled up. Ideally, you bring some support, funding, or resources, or can get to it. That's one reason we do spin-outs, because we can't get the resources internally. We have to go to a different kind of organization to get those resources once they're too mature for a research organization like yours. But it's nice to be able to say there's that, and then you try and figure out who your partnerships are. All that stuff has to be done to commercialize. What's the good news? Not your problem. When you do your research, you say, well, that's not so difficult. I've done this before. I can think of something like this. I can design the protocol. I can figure out how to do it. Those of us in commercialization look at that and say, not a big deal. Do it all the time. Meat and potatoes. And if you're new to commercialization, that's why people like me are in Cyprus. We teach that stuff. Okay, your organization has a disclosure form and has an IP policy. If you don't know where it is, ask him. Raise your hand. Everybody knows him, right? Ask him. He'll ask one of his staff to help you. If you know the staff, you can go directly to them. Raise your hand if you're on the staff. Good. See? There's people around you can ask. If you don't know how to fill it out, guess what? Ask them. They're here to help you. That's their job. So that part's easy. That's all you got to do. And then later on, what's going to happen if this is moving to market, they're going to come and say, hey, we got a technical guy over here at some company or at some agency, government agency or whatever, who would like to talk to you under an NDA so you can talk freely. And then you'll have a discussion with a colleague who is technical like you. You don't have to talk to the business people. Don't worry about that. But you do have to show up for the technical discussion because don't expect them to be able to talk about what you're doing at the level of technical understanding that you have. Duh, right? This is what we do at the CKTO. Don't worry about it, but we do a whole slew of stuff, and we make sure that they have the support that they need in order to treat your technology, your inventions well. So I will give you a couple of closing thoughts. My dad used to say nothing happens without a sale. In research, the sale is when you write that proposal and you either get internal funding or EU funding or RIF funding or one of those. Typically now with I don't know your internal procedures, but I suspect there's something similar, but with the EU and RIF, you have to think about what's the downstream impact. There's actually a category called impact. If you don't know how to deal with that, please raise your hands again. Go to these people. Go have a discussion with them. Say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Do you think there's any impact for this? And they'll be able to brainstorm with you. That's part of what they do. They like talking to you. The best part of my job over the past 45 years has been going to the labs talking to people. I love that. And many of you I've met here because if I hear something cool or I see something cool, I say, can I come over and visit and see what you got? Just to be a tourist. And then while I'm there, I get all these ideas of where it can go. Same kind of thing for these guys. Okay. Of course, to get it out commercially, we got to figure out who's going to buy it and where the sale is. Second thing is from a vaudevillian comedian named Milton Berle who said, if opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. How do you build a door? You start thinking about what the potential impact of your research might be. Then you go to your professional society and you're giving a paper or whatever, and you're talking, you're saying, da, 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 and you throw in a line, and the potential impact is things like this. And the next thing you know, some person, some man or woman comes up to you, and they hand you their business card, or they say, show you their badge, and it says .com at the end. You have just begun the commercialization process. You have established somebody who's interested. Let your people here who raise their hands know, because they'll help you follow up. What is that person? A potential funder, not directly, but their organization. A potential funder of sponsored research. A potential somebody who may hire you for some consulting. That's how it typically begins. Consulting and sponsored research. That's where the big hits come from. If we can get that moving, you know what comes next that's even better than licensing or spin out? Donation. Ask yourself, who's the biggest donor to this institute? And how much they give each year. I will tell you a little story. In another life, in another planet, I was married to somebody who was a midwife whose father just happened to be the founder of Business Wire, which is a big PR company. And he ultimately sold it, and he was a multi-billionaire. It's very interesting to be around a multi-billionaire. And Laurie Loquet was a great man because what he did with his money is he gave it away. He had pools of $100 million. He would give away 50 and reinvest the other 50. And so George Bush ended stem cell research in the United States. And Laurie said, well, that's 30 pools to Stanford. I'll keep your program alive. And while we're there, by the way, I will build you 2 stem cell research laboratories because I think stem cell's cool. Somebody gave me a tour of their lab and I got hooked. Then he rebuilt, because he's from Oregon, he rebuilt the University of Oregon. Was on their board of trustees. Rich people, if you establish a rapport with them, donate. Who becomes rich? Somebody who went through here, was a graduate student here or whatever, goes on to industry 20, 30 years later, they may donate if you keep touch with them. Somebody that you met at a meeting who you established a rapport with, you don't know who these people are. So be open to it. I'm not saying you go out and say, I'm going to try and find rich people. No, excuse me, are you rich? You know, so I can say, no, don't do that. But, you know, if you happen to bump, you know, when you bump into people, talk about what you do. Share the excitement. You do the coolest stuff around, but we don't talk about it with everyday people. So we can't be afraid to share. That's how you build doors. A well-defined imagination is the source of great deeds. You guys got the imagination. These guys have the well-defined process for commercializing it. That's where that great deed comes from. And if we do more of this in Cyprus, then that percentage goes up from 0.75 closer to the average for the EU. That's why they talk about Cyprus being a tech island. Well, you can't be a tech island without this kind of robust ecosystem. So we just got to demonstrate it can be done. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. I'm glad to answer questions. That's how you get in touch with me. I'm not going to hang it up here so you can stay on schedule. But I'm around. I'm always glad to visit, as they'll tell you. And I've been here a lot, so you're one of my favorite places to visit. Congratulations to you on your wonderful institute, and to my friend over here for what he does, and to all of you for doing the research, because you're doing the cool stuff. Thank you.
Any questions? So, yeah, if you can stay with us. I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm Thanasis Hatsilakos. I don't have questions. I have disagreements. Can I?
Sure.
You started by saying that you're just asking us to think about who would use it. And I'm saying no. You're not asking us to ask who would use it. You're asking me to restrict it so that Elon Musk can come and buy it and make me a little bit richer, make himself a lot richer, and be able to call the shots. And rich people donate. He donated $250 million to Donald Trump. If instead my results are public, then it can be used by many more people. And you also said, can I continue or?
Well, let me respond to the first one. Then you can continue. I'm asking you to think about who can use it. I'm not asking you to think about who you're licensing it to. You'll recall I said there's many ways to get things out here. My example of the whale thing didn't go to Elon Musk. It was never patented. It was just put out for the public because you do your research, but you want your research to be useful. If you want the people of Cyprus and the people of the EU to support science, it's got to be a quid pro quo. Sooner or later, the results of science have to lead to better everyday lives for people. Doesn't have to lead to corporate profits. That's one way of doing it. But there's other paths. Nobody's forcing you down a path. On the other hand, if there is absolutely no potential utility, and you can't even open yourself to the idea of potential utility, then you better go back to the Middle Ages and find some very rich person who's a benefactor and just happens to like what you're doing. You can be how to put this? What's the pinnacle in your field? If you're in biology, first you get a Lasker, then you get a Nobel Prize. That's kind of the pinnacle. You're in physics, you get a Nobel Prize. When we look at what people get Nobel Prizes for, it's because the stuff's useful. It's very good science, but it became useful. So there's nothing wrong with stuff being useful. That's a part of what science is about. But you are welcome to your opinion. You will find it hard, increasingly hard as time goes on, to get funded by the EU and RIF if you cannot indicate impact, because that is an increasingly important criteria as budgets get tighter.
My objection is not about use or impact. The title was Transforming Research into Impact. And I would say, no, you're saying transforming research into property and money. Research already has a huge impact. The most important impact anything can have, which is education.
I think we're just going to, I'm not denying anything you say, but I think at this point, so we don't tie people up, let's just agree to disagree on that one. Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for being here and the presentation you just gave to us. My question is about not saying out loud your ideas. And I was thinking that if you have an idea, the first thing you do is just ask around if it's useful for some people of your environment. So you just think, okay, if I have this, I have to ask around and see if it's worth going for it.
Let me clarify what I mean by that. I have an idea. I'll take a really stupid idea, okay? Anti-gravity boots. I have this idea for anti-gravity boots. I can ask around and say, do you think that would be useful or not? And people may say, oh yeah, I'm trying to dust up here on the ceiling. Anti-gravity boot would be great for dusting in my house. You know, I could see the use for that. At that level, it's fine to talk around. What you are doing, what you want to do, is not intellectual property. How you do it, I'm going to make an anti-gravity boot because I'm going to take a superconductor layer and I'm going to feed it this way and I'm going to do this, that, and the other thing. That's when it becomes intellectual property. I'll give you a concrete example. It's one that I was personally involved in. I'm sitting at a meeting. It's a God knows how I ended up there, but I got invited. I'm like, I'm going. It was a security meeting, military and police security meeting in Britain. I was doing some work for DOD, but I never expected to get invited to. My job was to beat swords into plowshares. I never expected to get invited to something like this. But I met a lot of really fascinating people, and one of the people I went out for a beer with was the head of security for the Queen of England. And he was Scottish. He goes, you know what keeps me up at night? I was like talking to Scotty in Star Trek. I had to do my best not to do my accent back. I said, no, what keeps you up at night? He goes, we're sitting there and some terrorist is coming in to blow up the Queen and we stop him and instead he blows up 200 tourists. That's the nightmare I deal with. And I said to him, how does the bomb work? He says, well, there's an explosive and a detonator, and, you know, that's how it works. I go, how's the detonator work? He said, usually it's a cell phone. Because they call the cell phone, it releases a charge, and that's the spark that starts the explosive. And I said to him, I think I know how to solve your problem. It was fluky. It just like went in my mind. The problem and the need to figure out how to stop the detonator is not intellectual property. How you stop it, how you do it is. But you have to do a constructive reduction to practice also. You know how you stop it? It's a funny story. I was working with the Navy, and they were, when they have underwater drones, they come up next to the submarine, and they do inductive coupling, like you do with, but this was 20 years ago, like you do with your cell phone. And what we were looking at was how you modulate the single in the inductive coupling so you could also transmit information. There's some very cool stuff going on that I've seen at University of Cyprus in this area, by the way. So I was like, something in me said, can you run inductive coupling in reverse? I said, I think I know how to do it, but I have a question. So I called up the guy at Oak Ridge National Laboratory I was working with to beat this into plowshares. He was going to put it in strips in highways so electric cars, as they drive down a freeway, can recharge so they could go further. That was what he was working on. I said, can you run it in reverse? He said, yeah, you would do co-inventor, right? I wouldn't have come up with that. He's the guy. He, the Scottish guy, and I are the three inventors of that technology, and gets invented at that moment. And we split it equally because we could figure out who was more important. But the point being, it wasn't until that guy went, you run it this way, that we knew how to do it. That was the secret sauce. So the secret sauce you don't talk about. Now, if I had said inductive coupling, somebody else probably could have gone and figured out the secret sauce, so you didn't talk about that. But if you say, we're going to stop the detonator, nobody had a problem with that one. Everybody got that. And you could talk about that freely and see if there was a problem. Any other questions?
Okay, so Leo, thank you. First and foremost, let me thank you personally for coming here. I mean, I always come happy at work. Today I had one more reason. So I just want to make a question. Your projection, I mean, you have been in Cyprus for 2 years. You've done so much to help the ecosystem in terms of valorization, etc. So in the spirit of, the festivities that are upcoming, why don't you be the ghost of Christmas future and tell us your projection of the valorization scene in Cyprus? I mean, you have seen it, you know the potential, just a projection, and then maybe we can see what we can do to either avoid things or to enhance them.
So here's my projection. Cyprus is at a tipping point. You can either go forward or you can stay stuck where you are and slip back. And if you don't think you could slip back, think about how there used to be a clothing industry in Cyprus. Gone! That's what I mean by slip back. The rest of the world is not standing still, and unfortunately you are caught in a situation where you are part of the rest of the world increasingly. Now to go forward, you're what we call a middle-income country. Middle-income countries get stuck because they don't have the critical mass to leapfrog typically, like, copying the US, Britain, France, whatever. So they have to find different paths to sort of jump over. And each country finds a path that is appropriate for itself, and I can talk about Thailand and some of the other countries I've worked in, and different paths that have been developed for different countries. The problem in Cyprus, and the solution for Cyprus, I believe, and this is only me, so please, this is not RIF policy or anything like that. The solution is this. There's a bunch of great researchers. There are a bunch of younger researchers who do worry more about where things go and where they go because they are not tenured, they are not established in their field. And meanwhile, as an institution, we want to crank out more researchers and more postdocs. And where are these people going? And Cyprus as a whole has one of the most underemployed STEM populations I've ever seen. Doesn't matter where you look, you got PhDs teaching elementary students, science PhDs. You got PhDs in organizations like RIF who are basically bureaucrats moving paper, not using their science knowledge. I mean, they're going to be automated out by AI at some point. How do you use this talent better? That's the question. How do we use the talent? Now, there's another problem. Let's go to the second problem. The second problem is on the corporate side. Most of you don't have big companies in Cyprus. Medchemy is not a big company. It's a mid-sized company by global standards. Big by Cypriot, mid-sized by others. But they're good companies. I'm not saying these are not good companies. They tend to be, with a few examples, Medchemy being one of the positive examples that I just mentioned, they tend to be innovation adverse because this is common in cultures where they're a somewhat isolated culture. You're an island culture, somewhat isolated because of that. That's what I mean. There's not, you don't have the same traipsing through of scholarly meetings that you would get in France, say. But they're also family owned, and they're owned by men typically, which means that she comes home after doing her PhD and being excited, and she comes into the family business, and Dad's like, well, me, and Grandpa's like, no way. It's just the reality. It's true in every culture that has strong dominance of family-owned business. As you get older, you tend to be more risk-averse. It's just the way it goes. That worked before. They're not aware that all the context is changing in the same way. Because they're saying, well, we're still milking the old cash cow. But when you milk a cash cow, at some point the cow dies. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? The answer is we don't think about moving technology and we don't think about moving ideas. Because when we move technology and ideas, we are typically moving it, as my colleague here said, to big companies who are in other countries. Because there's not the uptake in Cyprus. So if we want to move them and make a real impact in Cyprus, we're actually moving technology and people together. We're moving teams in that sense. We're taking two postdocs who know something about product development or something about both research and product development, and they are going with that technology into a company to help spin it up and make it a product for that company. And then the company either retains them or they stay and they become a product development small company, just like we have research and development small companies in the US. But that missing skill, that boundary spanning skill that goes from understanding the research to how you develop modern products does not exist very, very widely in Cyprus. This woman is an example of somebody who is bringing it to Cyprus because she just passed a certification exam in new product development, which I'm very proud of her for. So there are young people who are interested in it. We want to encourage more awareness, not that everybody has to take the exam, I'm not saying that, but we want to encourage this as part of our postdoc education and the way we think about how we move technology. It's a variation of something I saw in Thailand. In Thailand, King Mongkut's University of Technology Thonburi, not the biggest name university in Thailand, has more industrial funding than anybody else. And the reason they do is they do small projects for industry with master students. It's funded master students' theses. I'm doing a GIS system and I need to figure out how you make this layer. They hire a master student to do it, and they then go into the company later on. And they bring the ability to work with universities and bring technology out into the company. It's called absorptive capacity. Let's come back to Cyprus now. I'm sorry, it's so long-winded. The way over the tipping point is we do more in preparing our postdocs and our graduate students for non-academic careers, because there's only so many careers we have in research inside public institutions or universities. And if we say, your understanding of research needs to go beyond just how you do fundamental research to how you do applied research, which already exists in organizations like yours, and how that links into product development, then you can work that process, and that's how we revitalize and leapfrog this economy into the 22nd century. So it becomes, as my colleague here said, a matter of how we educate. We need to rethink how we educate our students, just like we rethought how we educate our students when Einsteinian physics replaced Newtonian physics. So it's just part of this paradigm shift that's happened in science around the world. Those of you who studied in the US have seen some of what happens, or in Britain have seen some of that difference. And it hasn't happened here, and it has to happen here in a way unique for Cyprus. If that happens, there's a very bright future, because the creativity, the good science is here. I see a lot of very exciting things. It's just there's this gap in getting it out. And people don't know how to get it out, and the people in industry don't know how to manage the risk. They can manage real estate risk fine, but they don't know how to manage risk involving new products. So that's my answer for you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your very stimulating presentation. Now, as you noted, the Cyprus ecosystem is rather small, and of course the investment is not to the extent that we wished. Now, there is a widespread view amongst politicians in this country that institutions and smaller units, the centers of excellence, should essentially be self-sustaining, more or less live on revenue from IP and patents. If you were to advise a politician, what would you actually advise them in terms of how they will finance research organizations? Do you agree on that proposition, on that model that they propose?
So I'm going to give you a nuanced answer. I don't think anybody survives on licensing, number one. That's a myth. If you look at what happens globally, every now and then somebody gets a big hit. Woo! And it builds the chemistry and the physics building, and then 20 years later, or 10, because nothing really lasts the life of the patent. 5, 10 years later, it's not so important, the revenues die. And then you're back in the same mess. So you ain't going to finance it that way. To me, a center of excellence is different than the Cyprus Institute. A center of excellence is a translational research entity that is put in place specifically to provide linkages with industry, to take the work and mature it to the next level and get it out. That's the whole logic for these things. And if you cannot get industry support, you do not deserve to exist. So yes, they should become self-sufficient, and we have numbers of examples of that in other countries around the world where this happens. And they do grants and those other things. I mean, it's not entirely industry, but they become self-sufficient through competitive awards and industry support. You only need to walk around even on some US campuses like Berkeley. Everybody knows Berkeley in California. There's an Exxon building. Exxon built a whole research lab there because they want to tap into the expertise. The Cyprus Institute is unique in Cyprus, to me. Your job is also to mature ideas and technology, but you are a resource whose sole mission is not to be translational for industry. You are a translational for the society. And that's a little bit different mission, which means, as my colleague back here correctly pointed out, not everything needs to go to a big company where the company's funding it. So there, if you're going to do that mission correctly, you're going to do the art history kind of stuff that I've seen in here. I've seen some interesting programs involving social sciences in here, as well as a lot of interesting technical stuff. There's going to have to be public support for that. It's not that because the goal of the impact is different than the goal of the impact for a center of excellence. The centers of excellence explicitly say, we are going to do this so that we can link this area with a problem in the strategic areas of the country and of the EU and build industry. If that's your mission, do it. Don't make excuses. But if your mission is to benefit the society in general and be diversified and be the place that you can do these multidisciplinary things across all sorts of fields, that's a different mission. So there I would agree with you.
You can stay on stage, and I'd like to invite Professor Malas as well for the one-on-one discussion. We have a set of questions.
I just call it as I see it. I figured where's the 74?
Yes, we hope so. Yes.
I do want to specify the comments are my own and do not reflect the policy of RAF.
We have several questions, and I have some notes here for you.
Oh, am I supposed to be asking the questions? Oh, okay, I'm asking the question, okay. Question number one, may I have the answer, please? Why is commercializing IP important for the Cyprus Institute?
Okay, so, well, as you rightly pointed out, the Institute has a number of missions. Of course, is the production of knowledge, but one key activity of the Institute is really to push, to the extent that this can be achieved, knowledge produced in the Institute towards the market, bringing, of course, the required investment if we can, but also we run a kind of another model. In others, we're allowing industry to come close to the Institute and collaborate. So we're creating that bridge between fundamental research, infrastructures and so on with industry needs, which in my personal view is a much more direct and much more focused connection between the knowledge producers and knowledge exploitation. Yeah.
So we've obviously got your
Sure.
organization here and this collaboration, which is very impressive. Are there other ways that you're supporting this commercialization mission?
Sure. Well, we have a nice team of people. So we have the structures, first of all, which took us a number of years to actually put that in place. It was an evolving process to actually mature those structures. The Institute also created the required vehicles. It's often thought in research organizations that we create companies and we keep most of the share, and then somebody comes and we obviously make a lot of money about it. That's not the case. We obviously now put in place also those structures, the support mechanisms, the education. We're doing that right now because researchers know up to a point in how to valorize their research, and you need to push them a little bit out of their comfort zone, which is, I think, we've reached a point of a very mature system of scouting also ideas and taking them further, yes.
So when we talk about pushing people out of their comfort zone, obviously we're talking about culture change here.
Yes.
A little bit. And can you talk a little bit about where you see this? I'm going to deviate from this question a teeny bit, I apologize.
That's okay.
But I want to keep the flow going. Where you see going next in enhancing, because I think we both agree that the research culture here is very important and nobody wants to jeopardize that. But as we enhance the culture of the institute, well, as you enhance, I'm sorry, not we, I'm not here.
Sure.
I guess for our, speaking on my RAF hat, as we enhance the culture of the institute, where do you see yourself and the institute going next?
Well, I think one of the challenges we have is that is to have the mature mechanisms, both within the institute but also in the country, for supporting that process. It's okay to scout ideas, it's okay to support the researchers, it's okay to maximize essentially this filtering, but the ecosystem, and I'm referring also to financing, of course, is still rather immature in Cyprus. And there are, as you know, initiatives from RIF. Your collaboration with them is part of that mechanism. There are private entities like Cyprus Seeds. But yet we have a long way to go so that scientists see that there is a continuity and in terms of also volume of investment. We've had several such projects which in some ways we burn our fingers as well in terms of because of the immaturity of the process. So I think what I'd like to see is really the policies implemented by the government to create that thrust that will link up with the mechanisms we have internally, so then that will engage more and more people. We're hoping for the first success story. We have one or two in the pipeline. So I think that what we're hoping is for one big success, and once we see that, then there's been one case in Cyprus so far in the health sector that's been a very big success, which went through tribulations and difficulties, but eventually worked out. So yes.
How do you incentivize your researchers to participate in this culture change that you are working on?
Well, clearly we have policies on IP sharing and revenue sharing and all those things. I think one of the problems we've encountered, they have encountered, and some of them are here, is that they didn't have the proper support mechanism, and hoping this year we will have, if you like, an A to Z guide exactly how the process should start. Some of your points here are very important. It's often thought, and this is part of the learning process that we want to develop in the Institute, that the moment you have an idea, you're going to spin it out, you create a company, and so on. So there is a level of, if I can call it that, immaturity in the thinking, how that process. So we want to educate also our researchers to know the steps so that we don't make any premature steps, but certainly they don't think prematurely. And the message I often, through the team, we often give them is that the best way is to mature first your idea well enough before we actually start thinking of any protection or commercialization. So,
yes, I would certainly agree that we want to protect as early as possible and spin out as late as possible, because we increase the value. And for those of you thinking about being entrepreneurs, it's a really shitty life. Nothing, I'm not trying to discourage you. I did it myself, but you got to have that passion to work 24/7 and not have the backup of your job here at the Institute if you're going to do it seriously. It's not a part-time job. The rewards can be very high, on the other hand, if you succeed. Do you see a problem in finding a balance between open access research and protecting IP for commercialization?
yes, I mean clearly that's always a challenge. So that from the one hand you have your KPIs in terms of publication and so on that you are trying to meet and get their knowledge out. From the other hand, you need to protect it. Well, I think that, and we had this recently, we had a challenge recently, is in order to promote, obviously, at the same time publication, but the protection, you need to have fast mechanisms of valorizing the idea and making sure that you move fast in the protection so you don't delay also the publication. So I think we're close to putting those mechanisms into place, yes.
Good. And we'll close with one question addressing education, which is, we've talked about the culture change. You obviously have a robust education program here as well. How do you begin to bring some of this culture change, this commercialization knowledge into the traditional education process?
Yes, that's a challenging task in the sense that researchers, young researchers, only know how to develop knowledge and the valorization of that knowledge. Of course, there are papers, there are PhD, and so on. One way of doing this is, it's really, and we have a few examples in Cyprus, which I would say they're successful, is to really bring in, and we haven't achieved this, but to bring in people that have valorized research opportunities early enough in the career researchers and really educate them. You know, as I said, we have very few companies that made it in Cyprus, but but they're very successful. So, and also we're trying to collaborate with some of those companies. Sometimes they become our competitors because they take our researchers. But getting these experiences as close, as early rather, in the education of our students is probably a good way forward. Another way, of course, is exposing them to people like yourself, which is making them aware of all the mechanisms that exist in valorizing research.
Thank you. Are there any questions from out there before we move on?
I want to ask you a question. This is slightly going back to the question I asked. It's a very critical one. Why do you think a center of excellence, what is the definition of excellence for you? A center of excellence, you said, is the one that should survive from commercializing research. What's the definition of excellence?
I think it's not so much the definition of excellence. It's that these were established in the EU with that mission. That it's the fundamental mission of these centers, the reason for supporting them, is not just to do research, but to transition research. And if the definition is to transition research in industrially relevant ways, then the metric is, can you support yourself? And if you can't, then you're not being industrially relevant. Now, I realize that personal view is different than most Cypriots hold. But I'm an American, and we have the experience of having university industry centers, we call them, that are self-sufficient, so it can be done. Is it easier to do it in the U.S. than Cyprus? Absolutely. But in the U.S., we're not providing this kind of money with the 5-year runway. And I have been in meetings at centers of excellence where I'm sort of astonished that even though people know the words to say, they're not walking the walk. So if you're trying to walk the walk in year 5, you're too late. You should have been walking it in year 1. And the American side of me says, see, in the US, it's okay to fail. You fail, you pick yourself back up, and you go on and try something else that works. Or if you're doing it, I'm going to set this down for a second. I'll try and talk loudly, okay? Remember my discussion, my mention of Lori Lokay? I once said to Lori, what's the trick, Lori? Why did you succeed and become this phenomenally wealthy person when so many others have failed at it? He said, put your hands out in front of yourself. You know there's a market opportunity out there. You know that's where you're going. But you don't control the world. You don't control the market. You don't control what's happening in technology. So you got to zigzag as you go and adapt as you go. And the whole question is, as you're zigging and zagging, it's like sailing. Are you ultimately going in the right direction as you tag? Are you heading forward? And if you are, you're fine. And then it's just the ones who don't succeed give up. And so what I think has happened in Cyprus, and again, this will probably get me kicked out of the country, but you know, I don't care. I'm going to say it because somebody's got to say it. It's like the emperor has no clothes. People sometimes think, well, we have jobs here. The government will support us. By definition, they're going to just keep on throwing money at us. And to U.S. ears, that's like, you've got to be kidding me. You said you're going to do this. You fail miserably at it. And now you expect me to throw more money at you? That would not happen in a company. It would not happen with the U.S. government or a state government. And then you have to add to the fact that your country is smaller than most U.S. cities. And no cities in the U.S. support centers of excellence. That's a federal or a state thing. And our states and our feds have a much larger budget than you guys have. So when people go back to the well and can't explain what they've learned and how they zigged and zagged because they were being flexible and trying to get there, I'm just not sympathetic. I'm sorry, I'm harsh that way, but you know, I'm 73 years old, so put it in perspective, I'm an old curmudgeon. But you can do it. There are centers of excellence that are doing it and moving in that direction. Again, I'm not saying don't go for EU money, not in RF money as part of the mix, or government contracts. But just direct appropriations, it's an unsustainable model for the country. And sooner or later, you're going to hit the kind of pushback that we're seeing all over Europe, where people are like, wait a second, I'm trying to deal with bags of groceries and there's inflation, and I want you to bring the price of groceries down. And yet you're funding science. I acknowledge that.
I understand your approach and your point of view regarding the centers of excellence. And we are not a center of excellence.
No, and I agree with you.
Yes, but
We have one of them.
we
host
host
one.
one, but we are not as an institution as well. On the other hand, allow me to disagree that we cannot interpret or define or invent retroactively the mission of centers of excellence. So what you're describing is how you approach or how you understand or how you would define the mission of the centers of excellence if you were to define it today. But when they were formed, when they were established, allow me to disagree, but this was not their mission to be self-sustainable. So from a point of view of a policy-making organization, the Deputy Ministry of Research, or the Directorate General of Growth, or whoever, the Ministry of Finance, or RIF, they have to take into account also what was the raison d'etre of the centers of excellence when they were created. If you read their mission in the call for proposals to which they applied for funding and they were successful, it was not written what you said. Okay, or maybe in some sense the latest applications that were successful this year, yes, it was clear from the Deputy Ministry of Research and Innovation that they had to be self-sustainable or more closer to the self-sustainability. But the existing centers of excellence, this was never written in their mission.
Yeah,
I understand that what you said is more positive towards the Cyprus Institute, but I have to...
Well, I certainly understand what you're saying, but if you apply for a grant and it says you're going to get 5 years of funding, it doesn't say, and we promise to give you funding after that. It says you got 5 years of funding. Make it happen. Gives you a ramp. So I do understand that I represent a different cultural heritage. And I do appreciate that not everybody agrees with my perspective. You're a widening country, you're not going to be a widening country forever. When you're not a widening, you're coming to the end of that slug of money too. Wake up.
No, let me say, I want to ask you this. Put it this way: if you were, I mean, you said at your introductory remarks that we have one of the lowest uptake of we have so many STEM graduates with PhDs and so on, and they go into not research, but they do other things that they haven't been trained for, or at least you don't need to have. So, if you were to design the research ecosystem in Cyprus, would you say that that system requires more capacity? Because we think that the model you describe is the model whereby you have enough capacity of doing research, and you actually mission some of that capacity to go into this very translational, in synergy with industry, in these technology parks that you described in various centers, where there is a marriage between industry needs and research. In Cyprus, we think, and I think you agree on that, the ecosystem is very small still. The human resources we have to make it bigger are there. The money resources is not available, and there's another element, the industry, although industry now research is international, of course. Clearly, in order to get industry coming into Cyprus ecosystem, co-sharing research is not as easy as perhaps in the United States. So I think that your model is the model of a much more mature and certainly a bigger country. We haven't reached that point. And the centers of excellence, although they've been described this way, and I was very much involved in the initial stages, the European Commission wanted for the widening countries to build research capacity to be competitive in research funding, rather than necessarily in exploitation.
Well, I'll just conclude by saying this. I'm going to respectfully disagree with you. I don't think you need to think about how do we indefinitely build research capacity. I think you got plenty of research capacity in this country. I think you need to think about, one, how do we avoid duplicating research capacity? That's number one. There's a lot of that. So that would free up other things. I think we have to think about how do we diversify the funding, which is a major factor here. So it's not all dependent upon government. And if you look around the world, it's gone down. Government has gone down in every country, pretty much. And I think it's a mistake to think that what I'm talking about is a US-centric model. I mean, you can look at what the Chinese do. You can look at NUS Singapore, the number 9 university in the world, founded after the University of Cyprus. Very different model that emphasizes the importance of linkages and the importance of both fundamental science and transitioning fundamental science. So I think that we have in Thailand, again, I mentioned another model that was adapted for the Thai situation, where there's strong industry linkage that brings in most master students at KMUTT, where I was special assistant to the president while working for the Thai government also, are funded by industry because most master's students go into industry. They don't stay. So that was their solution for that problem. And building those linkages that also build more sponsored research support and so on. So I think it's more a matter of saying, how is the ecosystem today? Who are the players in the ecosystem? What are the leverage points? And how do we free up some creativity and flexibility? Because this system is very rigid. It's very hard, for example, for a faculty member at a university to consult. It's very hard to do a spin-out from a university. You have to work around it to do it. As that one example is that you talked about, the success is somebody who said, I'm sick of the system, I'm leaving, and became a success. You don't want that to happen. That's not a good model. But we need to think about how we introduce flexibility. Well, not we, you Cypriots need to think about how you introduce flexibility. And it's important to realize that the problem here is not uniquely Cypriot. The reason I got originally famous was not for tech transfer, but for politics. So when I graduated out, I couldn't get a job. I went down to DC. I had a JD and PhD. The law firms were like, who'd you clerk for? I was like, I was getting a PhD. And the universities were like, what'd you publish? Say, I was getting a law degree, so nobody would hire me. So I became a lobbyist, public interest lobbyist. And I worked in science and technology, socially responsible science. And while I was there, I realized that one reason we didn't have as much innovation going on in the US was we didn't have risk-welcoming organization as opposed to risk-averse. Those are small companies. Risk-welcoming by that sense. So I was involved in putting in a piece of legislation. I actually drafted it, was the lead lobbyist, invited to the White House to meet the president because of it, called the Small Business Innovation Research Program, for those of you who have heard of it. That's my law. And then I did a couple of other things. But you need to, and that sort of kick-started the small high tech in the US. There was a little bit, but that was the big kickstart. We do over $1 billion a year, each year, to small companies in the federal government under that program alone. But you have to find some way to sort of shake up the system so that people like my colleague here can continue to do what they do, and people like my colleague here have more flexibility to do what they do. You know, you don't want to kick anybody out of the system. You just want to make it more flexible. And so that would be my advice, is to think about how you instill the creativity culturally that allows you to explore different kinds of models that allow you to leverage what you have built, but don't require you to continue to build in the exact same silos that you've created. Because I think you'll end up in research like the clothing industry if you do that. I didn't come to talk policy, of course.
So, shall we go to the...
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
To Elio, because we have the... If there are questions, of course we can take them.
Okay.
Non-policy, please.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. I will take your picture for the meeting.
So we will go to our online expert, Mr. Elio De Tullio. Mr. De Tullio, we can hear you. I don't know if you can hear us as well. Hello? We cannot hear you. Just give me a second. Yanni, just 1 second, please.
So I mean, the colleagues explained the rationale of the event today. We want you to, we want to introduce you to our partners. So have Ilya from So hence the 19th of December.
Elio, if you can give us 2 seconds so we can have our technician to fix the sound because we cannot hear you. Can you try now, Elio? No, still not. Just give us a second. Can you try now?
Hello, how are you?
Yes, we can hear you. Perfect.
Okay, great. So, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I didn't listen to Konstantinos' introductory words, so I assume that he was introducing me. I don't know if I can just start with the presentation. Please confirm.
Yes, you can start with the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, great. So it was interesting to listen to your discussion, and of course now intellectual property jumps in as let's say I don't know if a very welcome guest, but in any case it was mentioned at the very beginning, and it is the focus of the discussion of today. I prepared a presentation, but of course I will be happy to answer to your questions, if any, even following the discussions that have been recently held. And so if you would like to ask questions, please jump in and ask. I will start with my presentation. Can you see my screen?
We can see it, yes, and it's in a presenter mode, so it's okay, yes.
Okay, great. So I prepared some slides, but of course some of the concepts probably can be, let's say, familiar for some of you. I just summarize some of them. Here you see the title of my presentation: when should researchers talk about their invention? What should disclose? So I already answered this question. When, of course, in my opinion, is let's say researchers should talk about their invention possibly after the filing of a patent application, but of course you can find alternative ways. You can fill in the invention disclosure. You can have a provisional patent in US. You can also obtain a timestamp that are very useful for the burden of proof in case of any problem, any issue. And what should disclose, of course, before filing a patent application, less technical details as possible. But then sometimes it is necessary to disclose some technical details, so you should be very careful, and you should use non-disclosure agreements or upgraded version of non-disclosure agreements, for instance, non-disclosure, non-use, non-circumvention agreements that can be valid in some countries. But just let's start from the beginning. What does IP mean? We know that IP are monopolies, are, let's say, exclusivity rights. They also are useful for regulate fair competition and protection of consumers, but they give the owners the possibility to use and to exploit in exclusivity the products of their innovation and creations. They are exclusivity rights, they are enforceable rights, in particular title rights are enforceable, so once you get, let's say, the confirmation of your rights, then you can start a legal action, you can enforce your rights before courts, before customs, before other authorities. And they are flexible rights because they can be assigned, they can be licensed, so you can, let's say, allow third parties to use these rights. These are some of the main principles of intellectual property rights, the principle of first to file. So the first to file the application is the owner of the rights. Of course, there are untitled rights, like trade secrets, like know-how, and I have some slides about trade secrets know-how, so you can identify what are trade secrets. The principle of territoriality, so the geographic limitation of time the geographic limitation of the country of protection. So there are national protections, regional protections like European Union, and international protections. Usually, international conventions are bunches of national rights. And then the principle of national treatment implies that each state must grant the same protection to national of other states that it grants its own national. So it's a kind of reciprocity. You are guaranteed that if the rights are protected in your country, there is a reciprocity, so these rights can be protected also in the majority of countries of the world. And then there is the principle of limitation in time and scope. So patents protect invention, they expire after 20 years, trademarks protect brands, logos, and expire after 10 years. They can be renewed indefinitely. Designs protect the aesthetical part, the decoration, but also graphical user interfaces, and expire after 5 years. In European Union, they can be renewed for 4 times for a total duration of 25 years. You have different types of IP application. So once again, international system, regional system, national system, and in particular, you have a way to preserve let's say, your seniority at international level, the Paris Convention. So on the basis of this convention, you can use this priority period of 1 year, in particular for patents and utility model, to extend the protection of the first application in the country of origin in any other country of the world that is also a member of the convention through an international application or through a national file. In order to approach our, the main topic, let's start for what IP for? For commercialization, for going to the market, as it was mentioned before. And you have basically 3 ways to go to the market. The first way is the commercialization by its owner. So, and in any case, you need to secure your ideas through NDAs, through non-disclosure agreements, through NNN, and so you need to manage disclosure. Of course, also filing the patent application is a kind of management of disclosure, because after 18 months from the first filing, the contents of your invention, your patent, will be publicly available. But of course, you need to, let's say, get used to manage this disclosure, and before filing, the management of disclosure is through invention disclosure or, of course, the signature and the adoption of NDA, NNN, and similar. Before filing, of course, it is highly advisable to perform market researches, to perform patent landscape in order to assess the legal requirements, the novelty, the inventive step. So IP searches or FDO analysis are very useful either for assessing the legal requirements and for assessing the valid use on the market of your invention. You have a lot of, let's say, IP tools that can be used used for this purpose. You have professional tools, you have a free database like Espasnet, Patent Scope, and others, and of course also the use of search engines focused on patents like Google Patents can be fit for the purpose. If you have title rights, of course, the commercialization, it's easier. You need to license your registered IP right, and so the commercialization by its owner can be, let's say, founded on very strong pillars. But if you have untitled rights, that is different. Of course, untitled rights are submitted to very specific legal requirements. For instance, trade secrets must be not publicly available. They have an economic value, and you need to have implemented in your organization physical, technical, and legal measures to preserve the secrecy in the town. If we speak about assignment, is another way to exploit your and to use your IP rights. Of course, here in this case, they are very important, and you need to let's say, ensure that your assigned agreement contains some specific clauses like the identification of IP, of course, clauses about patent warranties, declaration of warranties, and governing law and competition and competent jurisdiction are always the very important clauses. They define the jurisdiction and the law to be applied to your regulation. Don't forget, in case of to register the assignee of the IP and the relevant IP office to record the assignment. And then you have business partnership. Even in this case, as you see, the first line is dedicated to NDAs, NNN, or material transfer agreements, consortium agreements, but you can also enter into business partnership through licensing, franchising agreements, joint ventures, spin-offs. All these agreements contain very strong and detailed IP provisions.
Elio, for some reason, you've stopped sharing your screen.
Oh.
We cannot see it now.
What is the last slide you took? Okay.
Yes. The next one. Slide 11. Okay.
Okay, so the 11 was the assignment, and then business partnership. This is just a preliminary slide regarding non-disclosure agreements that are designed to prevent your potential business partners from disclosing any confidential information received by you in confidence and related to your business. This is just, let's say, a preliminary list of clauses that can be included in non-disclosure agreements, like the definition, the specification of the type of information not covered, of course, in order to define also the exclusion, the indication of the law and jurisdiction, that is very important, the listing of specific purposes for which the information can be used by the other party, the provision of damages in case of unlawful disclosure of confidential information, and the specification of the duration of the NDA. This NDA is very useful, in particular before filing a patent application, and in some cases also before filing an invention, before using an invention disclosure. And now let's talk about invention disclosure. This was already mentioned at the very beginning. Invention disclosure is a comprehensive document that outlines the detail of an invention and demonstrates its potential patentability. So sometimes most of the knowledge transfer offices, they use invention disclosure form, in particular for software or other inventions. It provides a foundation for your IP counsel to draft the patent application, so they can be used also for providing additional and detailed information to your IP counsel in case you would like then follow up with the patent application. They give the necessary information to assess whether it is worth continuing with development and the patent process. And so they can be used also in court trials when a dispute arises. Having a well-drafted invention disclosure can serve as evidence of your inventive process and can contribute to the defense of your intellectual property rights. Of course, my suggestion is always to try to opt for patent filing as soon as possible, but as mentioned by Leah before, you can, let's say, use, let's say, a kind of priority, let's say, act, just filing a provisional before the US PTO, or you can use the timestamps at European Union level, as you will see in a few moments. Some high-level items that all invention disclosure need to include. Bibliographic information, so names of the inventors, instances of any work, with third parties, existing agreements related to the development, like joint development agreements, government contracts, any ongoing commercial activities, of course the prior art, so the extent of technology relevant to the invention, the value statement, so the advantages and potential applications of the invention, and the description of the invention, so the description of the problems solved by the invention and the novelty aspects. For instance, if we have an engineer that develops a unique AI algorithm for predictive analytics, and then she submits an invention disclosure or an invention disclosure form before the Technology Trust Office and use this document for, let's say, claim its seniority and evaluate the indication that is an official I-21st moment. Later, she discovered that a competitor has released a similar product, but the invention disclosure timestamp or provisional can give her priority, leading to a successful patent application or a successful patent case. Some of the advantages of the invention disclosure are, of course, to establish a date of creation, to evaluate the patent potential, to keep your IP file in order, to capture valuable ideas earlier, and to align with business strategy, and of course, establish inventor rights. Apart from the provisional that on which we will focus in a few moments, you can also put qualified timestamp in the European Union. So we have the e-identification and authentication services valid at European Union level. So there you can identify trusted services in any country of the European Union, in any member state, and you can use these services to obtain timestamps that can be used for your invention disclosure. So from the moment an idea is developed, it is essential to find this balance. So of course you need to share the information for business purposes or for other purposes, even for publication purposes. But at the same time, you need to preserve your possibility to file a patent application. So it's very important to, let's say, to have a clear idea about the stage of development, the type of the invention, and the goals of the researcher. So before public disclosure, researchers could start to discuss about their invention through academic papers, conferences, seminars, online platforms. Of course, the information that can be shared be, if possible, not too technical, but in case you already have, let's say, you have used provisional or invention disclosure protected to a timestamp, of course, you can go a little bit more into details. Researchers should provide enough information to establish that the invention is the basic requirement for patentability, and the full details should remain confidential until a patent application has been filed. This is at least our suggestion. So after filing patent protection, researcher can start to publicly disclose the invention through academic journals, conferences, other forums, without losing patent rights, can disclose scientific details and potential applications, and the application can offer a level of protection throughout the patent examination process. Of course, you have listened that there are the priority rights that you can use. So, for instance, you can file an application before the Cyprus Patent Office. Then you have 12 months priority to extend the protection through a PCT, and then you have additional 18 months priority in order to, let's say, nationalize your PCT in the countries of interest. But you don't have to, let's say, to overuse the priority right. If nothing happens in another jurisdiction, because, for instance, somebody went through a database and found your the drawings or the contents of your patent application and started to, let's say, infringe your rights, don't forget that the enforcement of your rights is on your shoulders. So the cost must be borne on you, and so that is why, let's say, confidentiality is always a good tip to consider before disclosing information to anybody. So the disclosure of information should be carefully considered if, of course, you don't have the financial strength to enforce your rights, in particular in some specific jurisdictions that are a little bit far from your country of origin. And, you know, in terms of commercialization stage, researchers should communicate intellectual property rights, including, of course, granted patents or patent application. You should notify to the public the status of your patent application. They have been registered, that is even better. Researchers should communicate the proof of concept and the prototyping data, and may enter into licensing agreements, as we'll see in a moment. They can also enter into other business agreements like industrial partnership, collaboration agreements, and also they can attract investors to invest money in their inventions. What are the risks of course, please interrupt me if you have any question. Otherwise, I will go on. Okay. What are the risks of premature disclosure? I can hardly listen to you.
Would someone like to answer? Risks of premature disclosure?
Okay, so I go on. So what are the risks of premature disclosure? So before filing a patent, the main risk of public disclosure are not so lawful novelty of patent rights in some jurisdictions, prevention of international patenting, so increasing risk of copying or imitation, difficulty in maintaining the rights as trade secrets, because once again, the protection you cannot give you cannot get the you cannot take the protection as trade secret for granted. You know, be sure that your trade secrets can be enforced. You need to implement in the organization some actions. Reduced negotiating power, damage to competitive advantage, and legal and financial implications, because of course you need to be ready to react. So how to mitigate the risk of premature disclosure? So you can, of course, limit the disclosure. Once again, what I meant before, sign non-disclosure agreements or upgraded version of NDAs like NNN, file a provisional patent application or use a timestamp available at European Union level, and of course consult with your EU IP attorney to understand the specific rules that apply to your jurisdiction, or the competent jurisdiction included in your NDA or in your LNN. Once again, here are some non-disclosure agreements, basic provisions, and if we go a little bit more into details, of course we can look at here, in particular for trade secrets, this kind of NDAs should state clearly which information, trade, personal, technical data constitutes confidential data and belongs to the company or belongs to you, define the limits of the use of confidential information, of course, only if the use is necessary for carrying out the work in your organization. If you are working in an organization, your organization must have implemented all visible measures in order to protect confidential data. In case you are working for an organization, you should be sure that you have prohibited the use of confidential information acquired from previous employer or experience, limit the printing and distribution of documents, including confidential data, provide that confidential data must be returned to the company in case of termination of the employment contract, and provide for an extension of the non-disclosure obligation even after the termination of the employment contract. This is most related to trade secrets kept in the framework of an accusation of a company. You know that you have this possibility of provisional patent application that is a specific peculiarity of US. You can file a provisional patent application without formalities before the US PTO. This allows inventors to file the invention without the need to make a formal patent application. So after filing a provisional patent application, the inventor has 12 months to file a non-provisional patent application, so a formal application that will take priority from the provisional application. And if the non-provisional application is not filed within 12 months period, the provisional application is abandoned and the filing date becomes irrelevant. So this is a table about the advantages of a provisional patent application in US. Of course, there are some disadvantages. There is no examination. There is no protection beyond 12 months. No patent rights granted, but also kind of protection of this preliminary information. And then this non-provisional application must be filed in 12 months. But there are a lot of good advantages. And once again, as Leah said before, in one day you can obtain a priority date. You can, you can also, that is from the grace period. For instance, in US, you can use the grace period, that is a limited period of time during which you can publicly disclose an invention without losing the right to file a patent application. In the US, this period is 1 month from the first public disclosure, sale of the invention, and the essential requirement is that the disclosure must be made by the inventor himself or by someone authorized on his behalf. And of course, before this 12-month grace period, the inventor must file this application in order to obtain patent protection. Of course, this grace period is not available in all countries, particularly in Europe. There is no grace period of public disclosure, and public disclosure before filing destroys novelty. Some other countries operate 12 months grace period. This is not an exhaustive list, but you can have a look at this and bear it in mind. In some other countries, this grace period is also countries member of the European Patent Convention is not 12 months, but is 6 months. there is also a table with some special requirements of the grace period, the impact on international patents. So, I mean, the localization, the check of the relevant law and applicable law and, related to the jurisdiction in which you like to have your invention protected and valid should be ascertained with some care. And I will just, this time is running, please. I would like just to show a few slides about its secret, if you allow me.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Because it was mentioned before, the issue of trade secrets, that is very important. Of course, that is another way to protect intellectual property rights. I would like just to show you what is considered trade secret in European Union in particular. Of course, the protection of trade secrets is very high level also in US. In European Union, trade secrets are protected through a directive that harmonizes the member states' legislation and regulations starting from 2018. The key legal requirements are that this information should qualify as trade secrets, so the information must be not publicly available. They must have an economic value, so they should be considered economically valuable, and you have implemented the organization, physical, technical, and legal measures to preserve this secrecy. And this is very important in order to be able to enforce your trade secret against third parties in case of an infringement happens. So what are trade secrets? This information can be considered trade secrets: know-how, technical, commercial, operational, financial information, even communicators, correspondences, production, manufacturing processes, company strategies like business methods, customers lists, recipes, chemical formulas, designs, prototypes, price lists, distributors lists, and internal documents and database. You can find more information in this study that is publicly available on the EU Observatory, EUIPO. The EUIPO is the EU Intellectual Property Office website. You can find a lot of information in this study that is an overview of the protection of trade secrets in EU member states. But this is my last slide. So you need to perform a step-by-step implementation in your organization in order to protect your trade secrets. So you must classify the confidential information in order of let's say, be able to enjoy the protection. So top confidential, and of course going down through those documents that are not let's say, so confidential. Then, of course, it is better to revise and update your agreements, even employment agreements or NDAs, including specific NDA clauses and specific clauses related to trade secrets. In terms of physical, it's better to have special premises dedicated to the presentation of trade secret documents. You need to allow, for instance, employees to use encrypted language or other cybersecurity measure to preserve the secrecy in case the secrecy is related to something that is, let's say, preserved in your laptop or your device. And of course, you need to train employees. You need to be trained and to let's say, implement step-by-step processes in order to, let's say, to ensure the protection of these trade secrets. So that's all in a nutshell. Sorry for the. I was very fast, but I need to jump now and take a train. But of course, I'm available for a few minutes for your questions.
Thank you very much, Elio, and apologies from our side too for the slight delay. Do you have any questions that you would like to ask Elio? No? Okay, thank you, Elio, and we will continue with the second part of the one-on-one discussion. I think it will be beneficial if Konstantinos or George Biskos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elio.
Elio also does work for the CKTO. He's one of our contractors here too.
Konstantino, would you like to come on stage?
We can proceed with the schedule as it was. So try to keep it short.
This is the part where we talk very fast.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how do you assess the state of your IP portfolio here at the Institute? And do you see room for improvement in it?
Well, I think given the mission of the Institute that we discussed earlier, and given our maturity in terms of our efforts in commercialization, our portfolio in terms of volume at least is quite decent. My colleague Anna later on is going to have a presentation where she's going to give you a glimpse of what we have protected so far. In terms of breadth, I would say we don't have the usual clients. We have people from all over from all the centers coming to us and asking us to help them protect their inventions. So that's quite encouraging. Still, there are some areas that they haven't wet their feet. So we are trying to encourage them as well. What is a very important milestone, though, and this is what I think sort of the president mentioned it, is that in terms of commercialization, so we only transferred IP so far to our spin-offs. We haven't managed to sell, to license, and this is a huge milestone. This is something that we are actually now working on with one of our researchers that has a patent. So I think that achieving that milestone, we will reach a point that I think it will be very representative of the output of the Institute in general.
So, talk a little bit about what you have in place to support researchers who say, I think I have something here, but I don't know, and how can you help them identify and protect their inventions?
So more or less we have a suite of services. We actually follow the Central Knowledge Transfer Office, all the steps from IP ownership assessment. So when researchers come to us, we discuss with them, we see who owns the IP and so on, all the way to patent landscaping, market, seeing the market potential, all the way to commercialization. So we adopted this protocol, these steps from the Central Knowledge Transfer Office. Something that you guys may not know and we want to bring out to you is that the Central Knowledge Transfer Office has a program called Hub and Spoke. So Hub is the knowledge transfer office, and we, the technology transfer office at offices at each institution are the spokes. So essentially, we are getting trained by these guys, and in order to train and cater to you. So we are following more or less in terms of the commercialization like steps. We are following this established way of doing it. But what we also do, we engage experts. So this is an example. Today we wanted you to meet a couple of people that we work a lot with. We engage knowledge transfer experts in terms of when there is an opportunity for someone to, when there is an area that we want more expertise, patent attorneys, etc. But also is the education and the sharing. I mean, this is actually a prime example of how we do it at the Institute. We do it from day one, from induction. When people come at the Institute, we have with them one-to-one sessions and explain how and what our approach is to IP. And we try to do it in a more fun way, hence the fireside chats today and so on and so forth, instead of, the presentations, etc. And something that we finally we have in terms of resources, we plan to launch soon a handbook for our researchers to aggregate all the processes. We have our policy and on the portal, we have our guidelines, etc. We will soon release a handbook, a very easy guide and a short guide with references for our researchers. So this.
Great.
Yeah,
what do you need from the people here or other researchers in order to do your job?
So I just mentioned what we do to support and what we need from them. What the support that we need is, I mean, we need engagement. We need active collaboration. We don't usually ask for a lot of your time, but we engage our researchers throughout the process. From very important things like market insights, they know the area. You said it earlier. I mean, we are not experts on each area, so we need them to explain to us the nuances of their invention. We need them to give us market insights where this could be useful, etc. And I think at the end of the day is also trust. With every administrative service at the Institute, we want to gain the trust of our researchers and make them understand that, we are stewards in this, but we can be very good collaborators as well, and we want to share with them. So, yeah, this is what we want from them.
So I'm going to hop down a question. We talked earlier about the problem of people shares of inventorship, which obviously translates into downstream revenues. If a group of inventors are having trouble figuring that out, how can you help them?
So, you said it very well earlier. I mean, usually they come up with a sharing scheme by themselves. They know. They have been in the lab. They know who did what. They have their logs. They have everything. Usually, we don't have such problems. Or luckily, we haven't had many such problems, even with people that left the institute. So we have cases that we have protected with people that they have left the institute. When you leave the institute, your engagement, your commitment changes, and we manage to. What is challenging sometimes is with projects and with external collaborators, with companies, for example. So what we do, we try to do our due diligence, and we try to study carefully consortium agreements, non-disclosure agreements that they have been signed, and we're trying to help and represent our staff, distinguish and clarify the percentage of ownership amongst them, and of course the entities. Yeah.
Good. And I would agree. Most of the confusion in this area arrives if you're dealing with a different consortium member who thinks everything belongs to them, basically. Regardless.
Or they just want everything to belong to them. I mean, we have cases with companies that it's crazy. Their approach is crazy, but we mitigate them, we manage them. We just like.
Yeah, I've seen it with universities too, so it's not just companies. The Chinese have a phrase for it. They call it Great Han Chauvinism. But anyways. Let's see. Final question. Do you feel you're adequately resourced, or do you have to prioritize IP? Do you sometimes miss something important?
I'll tell you, I mean, in terms of resources, I think we are the most well-resourced TTO in Cyprus. Okay, we strive a lot for it. Just to mention that 60% of our staff are soft-funded. Of their time. So we have to write projects to the EU to get funding, and then the colleagues, we need to put time in projects just to subsidize for our time. Okay, so it's not that the institute has been very, very generous, and technology transfer is high on its priorities. Yet we are doing our part as well, and we manage to bring in the funds to cover. When it comes to resources for protecting, okay, we have a good budget, but not an unlimited budget. So what we try to do, we try to maximize it. For example, taking opportunities like the Central Knowledge Transfer Office. So this year we managed to get services and services for the landscaping and the market assessment and so on, and also now the IP booster, and we have made huge operational savings, okay, and we will put those money to other inventions that, I mean, when we did the prioritization in the beginning, we thought that, okay, because as you said, it's a very expensive game, I mean, we cannot cover everything, so we gave room for more inventions because we took advantage of opportunities. Also, the it's the IP booster from the EU that we had. So what we're doing, we're trying to maximize the very generous funding that we have from the institute. I think resources are not that big of a problem for us. And something that, you know, maybe it's interesting to mention, just to close with, is that I think with AI now, there are amazing tools that they can like boost your productivity. And we are a team of tech-savvy people, and we are looking into it. We are looking now into tools that can help us maximize our capacity using AI tools. And I think now is the chance for smaller teams utilizing these tools and having greater impact rather than, you know, an army of technology transfer officers.
Are there any questions out there for my colleague here? You know where he lives.
Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being here, and thank you for taking part in this.
We will have one more questions session with Professor George. It will be very difficult to hear his point of view as well. So if we hear Professor Malas' point of view, then Constantinos, George, would you like to come here?
I saw my name. Hi. I saw my name of the program, but I didn't really know what I have to do, so I was just sitting there listening.
Well, I'm supposed to ask you questions. You're supposed to answer.
I figured it out.
So there's a whole slew of things that motivate research, like the potential for academic recognition, potential commercialize, desire to see it used, just the fun of doing it, monitorizing your findings, all these things come into play and so forth. Everybody has their own mix. Do you find the Institute here is supportive of your particular mix of motivations?
In a way, yes, and in a way, no. Um, I'll stress out the no, perhaps, because the yes is self-obvious. I think we have evolved. I mean, we were the guinea pigs in the way. So we were one of the few people, actually it has been something like 5 people that have gone into these directions. And I think when talking about innovation at the Cyprus Institute, it's something that has started maybe 5 years ago. Now, for the time of a startup company, 5 years is too long.
Yeah.
And I think we are still at the stage where we are trying to figure out how to do things at the technical side. So how to apply for patents. Okay, we've done that. How to try to attract additional funds. Even how to try to communicate with RIF and explain our difficulties. So yeah, there's a lot of time that, in my view, has been lost.
Well, you and I can talk offline about the RIF question. I would love to help you solve that. Not that I have a lot of influence on anything other than my little turf. But anyways, as you can tell, I'm not afraid to open my mouth. Moving on. Do you find that the Institute is very helpful when you come to parts of proposals that say, how do you address the economic, environmental, social impact? Or do you have to develop those on your own? Are there kinds of help you would like to have that you're not getting?
I guess the answer is very similar to what I said before. I think now we are at the stage where we have teams in place, and I hope we should start soon, in a way, delegating activities when it comes to impacts for specific people. But because I realize I cannot write easily the impacts sections in proposals. So now, especially in our center, we have a dedicated team that is actually moving forward and claiming part of the project when it comes to impacts, dissemination, exploitation, stuff like that. So that takes a lot of burden of our shoulders.
Terrific. Maybe interesting to do a training on how you use AI for that. So there are some interesting things you can do there. That's one of the places that AI works pretty well for the level of a proposal. We heard earlier sort of this pushback on the IP and commercialization because it creates sort of a conflict with the advancing knowledge in somebody's perspective. Do you find that in your own work, this tension between thinking about commercialization or impact and use downstream and doing the research and developing the research, or is that not a conflict for you?
No, from where I sit, and basically the topic that my research is focused on is not impacted by that much. I mean, it's all about technology. So at the end, when we write papers, or I can say that we can wait in writing papers before any IP is out there, and it's not a big loss. Also, our field is not, you have very fast-growing fields like IT, AI now. So if you wait there for a couple of months, it's really a long time. For us, 1 year is still okay, and I think within a year you can take care of all the what is needed for the IP protection.
Reflecting on your experience, could you talk a little bit about the benefits you have personally gained from protecting intellectual property, either here or somewhere else, and then also about your experiences here in that regard?
Well, I haven't seen the benefits yet, I would say. I have changed my mind along the way, so I was much more into research and publishing stuff rather than protecting them. But I think you mentioned it. It's also about thinking about the next generation more. And I had actually this dilemma when I was starting off as a faculty member, not here, in other countries. And my dilemma was, okay, why should I train more PhD students, given that the academic system is so saturated everywhere. And the path of innovation seemed the, let's say, the most obvious path to take. And then I could justify my role as a supervisor for PhD theses. And that's where it came to protecting IP. Actually, all the IP came from students that they had an idea, they developed it during the PhD, and then that was their passport for the next step.
Very interesting, very interesting. And finally, when you develop your research timeline in your proposals in that, do you find it hard to take into consideration when you're writing a proposal how I integrate IP commercialization into what I'm proposing either to Horizon Europe or RIF or somebody else, or do you find that once you do it, a kind of easy process?
I don't see it as a problem, meaning that, I mean, if you look into innovation projects, these are actually tasks that you have to do in any case, so you can plan them well within the project. If it's, let's say, research projects, then I think what happens in reality is that ideas are there, so in a way you're thinking what kind of tools and funds you can dedicate to develop them further. I guess the main message is that you have your timeline on innovation, and then you try to see how you can use tools that you apply for to.
And then I'm going to ask you one last question now. Other than giving you a big hug and a pat on the back, okay. Is there anything specific the Institute could do to better incentivize you or your colleagues to participate in this new world of IP commercialization?
That's a good question. Well, I think one of the issues with the Institute specifically is the long times. There's a lot of bureaucracy. We need to wait on things, trivial things even. So I'll tell one example. Due to the activities on innovation and research, I need to travel a lot. So I figured out that it's easier to try to have some pocket money in the companies and use this money to travel. Because if I go through the Institute, I have to lose half a day in order to get to travel. That's a small example. So I guess the message or the main problem would be to try to simplify processes here in order to go from the idea to the patent and to application very, very fast.
Great insight, great insight. Thank you very much. I will just say you're not the only one with bureaucratic problems.
I know. I'm coming.
I find it's easier to just buy coffee if I'm having a meeting myself than try and go through the authorization process internal to RIF.
Okay. All right. So I introduced myself because I didn't speak before. I am one of the director of one of the 7 centers of excellence that you were mentioning before. One important point along the lines of what mentioned by George is before we bring to commercialization our products and services, we usually do them internally, I mean at Cyprus Institute level. Meaning that first we start to sell these products and services and we try to see a little bit learning by doing, let's say prices, feedback from end users, who are our competitors. So I think we are in the process of doing a lot of these things before we try to transition and push the IP outside the Institute. What I found difficult a little bit here at the Institute is that we have been shaped for running research and not for that much delivering products and services. So when you go into the regulation of the Institute and try to generate revenues from products and services, you bump into policies that have been shaped for the research, for Europe reportings, for instance, and nothing has been shaped or thought to propose something that is competitive for products and services. So, you know, if you are stopped at the real first stage of your commercialization by internal regulation obstacles, that your product cannot be competitive enough, you will not go to the next step. And currently, I am facing this big thing at the Institute that we never thought of developing a strategy for pricing our services and products in a very competitive way. That's a shame. I benchmark, for instance, the price of myself as a person day for delivering services. If I look at the Cyprus Institute, I am at a given amount of money, but then if I look at my competitors, I am cheaper than a PhD student in Greece. I am much cheaper than a technical person in France. How it comes? It comes that we are not having a proper policy to charge my time for a service. And then when I go to compete on tenders abroad, like with the World Bank, that there is a given number of person month, and then I end up with a very small amount, and I'm very competitive in this respect. I am like 5 times more competitive than Northern Europe. For the same person month, I am 5 times cheaper. So, and we are talking about, for this example, €500,000. It's not something small. It's an example as, like Josh was mentioning. Another example is development fees. We have a policy at the Institute of Development fees of 10 to 15%. This is ridiculous. We're not selling potatoes here. We're doing a lot of R&D, and we need to get back the money we're investing in R&D. And if we have 10% of development fees, in the sense that every service you sell, and we don't serve millions of services, you get 10% back, the business is not good. We will not generate sufficient amount of money. The overheads as well. I mean, we have a policy of 25% overheads. What is the incentive for researchers to stop their research, to produce products and services, and get little bit of incomes? So little that there is no interest to develop products and services because the policy of the Institute is not shaped for that. So there is a completely lack of incentives in terms of financial return for the scientists to stop to write proposals, to stop to educate the students, to stop to write papers, and work in generating services that are not aligned with the market price. And then the return on financials for the researcher is so small that it stops us completely. And all these things are the first step before commercialization of everything. So we have also to look internally. We're doing great in terms of many initiatives internally, whatever. But this first thing, which is, you know, the money. If we are not good in these things, nothing will go further.
It's an interesting comment. It's certainly true that just like you can be too expensive, you can be too cheap, ironically, and then people are like, are they really any good? Which is another issue that brings up. I do think that it is very true, because I experienced this personally. The US government has a law that says you can't sell your services cheaper to anybody than you sell it to the US government. So I had to be careful in coming to Cyprus because the wage rates and salary rates here are substantially below the US. And I think that's what you're talking about, sort of the equivalent of that. And it is an issue. I will say 2 things. Number one, I give you credit for doing it right, because you're right. That is the way to approach it. Do some development, test marketing, feedback from the market, from the customers downstream to make sure you're on the right development track, change what you're doing accordingly, and mature the product to the point where it's appropriate for a spin out or a license or whatever. So I think that's 100% correct. The only other comment I'm going to make, because it gets into internal Cyprus Institute policy, which I'm not going to discuss, is that things change typically in organizations when people bring up the problems and they also bring up solutions at the same time. So where there's a problem, they come forward with both the problem and a solution. I find that works very well in large organizations. The other thing I would close with is this is an example of where if we're going to march off in this direction, we're going to have to be flexible, more flexible than we've been in the past, institutionally as a country, not just Cyprus Institute, but everybody. Other questions or comments? You had.
Hi. Maybe, as I understood, you were on the research track and then you moved on into commercializing some of your research, if I'm correct, right?
My 100% FTE is on research. So I do that as a hobby at the moment,
Okay.
hoping that it will take off at some point.
And my question is, what did you have to change in your ways in the sense that, you know, it's a learning curve moving from research into how you commercialize things. Did you have to learn anything that you would advise us to learn as well, maybe in some skills and so on? And also, any advice for young researchers that they just starting now and so on?
Well, as Leah said, my job is not to commercialize. I'm here for the research and the development. And I'm hoping that other people are going to pick it up. So I didn't have to learn something new. Okay, of course, I'm reading about what needs to get an idea out there, but I realized quite soon that I'm not the one who has to do that.
Thank you.
So I will add one thing. Anna here is an example of somebody who went through RIF's product development course. We'll be modifying it somewhat probably in the next round, but the RIF does offer a free course in new product development, and that helps you begin to understand how your research gets transformed into a product which informs you. And when, for example, my colleague here said, you know, we'd like to know what you think are the market applications. It talks about how you figure that out and a bunch of other things. If you want to see some of this stuff, just basic concepts, another approach to it, the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is a UN agency that's responsible for intellectual property around the world and harmonizing national systems, has on their website something called a toolkit for new product development using innovations in the public sector or in the public domain, that's it. But if you go WIPO toolkit on new product development, it'll pop up. That's something that I did under contract for WIPO. There's little cartoons that explain the concepts and spreadsheets there that are tools and a variety of other training material. So if you're looking to spend a little time on the, just seeing what else is out there in the world, that's one place you can get a quick overview.
Also, as Leah said earlier, it's our job to assist you with this. So we are here to support you, either Anna, myself, or Konstantinos, either one of them. So we are here to support you.
And the fact that we are a small institute, with a small team but a small institute, is like really helpful because it gets personalized. I mean, Anna, for example, nowadays, Anna is working a lot with George now. I mean, and it's not like we are I mean, one of us is dealing with one venture. So so we are focusing on it. We are growing with them. We built memory. We built the same vision. We shape the same vision. So this is one of the perks of being in a small organization and having few cases. Not.
Yeah. The only other thing I want to add is, despite all the sort of glitches and problems and issues that have been raised, the fact that these guys are doing this, they're doing a series of them, the fact that they were able to get the head of the institute to show up and participate is a sign that the institution is taking it seriously and trying to find its way into the future and do that effectively. So that is, so as here being here also, that's an important factor. It's not like there's no support. So you don't want to give up on the system. You want to work with the system.
Yes, we can go to Anna's presentation.
So just to wrap up.
Just to wrap up the session.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm afraid my presentation will not be as entertaining as Leah's. It has been a very good session so far, interesting insights and discussions. So next in this session, we will explore how the IP framework of the Institute can support innovation, the role that our office plays in this, different ways you can engage with us, and we will conclude with a couple of examples from our IP portfolio. So you, as researchers, are working on trying to answer important questions. We understand how important your work is, and naturally, you're looking at big problems that currently face our society. And you come up with an idea for one of these big problems. What do you do? Who do you talk to? What are the next steps? How do you approach issues that concern IP? How can you protect your ideas? So the answer to these questions can be found in our IP policy and, of course, through our office. The IP policy of the Institute serves as the backbone for our innovation ecosystem. And it is important that you understand the basics about IP and how this gives you control over your invention. And this control it applies to how your IP is used, managed, or shared, for example, in different projects. But this is not all. It also enables future investments. It promotes knowledge to be shared, and enables economic growth. So let's explore our policy. You can find it, if you scan this, you can find it on our Institute service portal. And over there, you will first find the definitions. It is important that we establish a common language when we talk about IP, so we understand each other and we are aligned. It also provides the rules and guiding principles that each of you should know. It also outlines how inventions should be disclosed with our office, which is very important that you do that as early as possible in order to secure your IP rights. And what else can you find there? You can find further documents that support it. You can find a document about the IP evaluation process. You can download our invention disclosure form that previously was discussed. You can find types of non-disclosure agreements that you can use for projects and collaborations. And you can also seek advice from us when questions regarding the IP policy arise. And on that same page, you can find also the revenue sharing scheme. And it's important, as mentioned before, that everything that relates to your work done here at the Institute, the IP that is generated from that work, it does belong to the Institute. In that regard, we take care of all the cost, and we manage the IP protection as well. We do recognize how hard you work, and inventors are officially recognized for their contribution, and we do have, like I said, this very generous revenue scheme. So let's take a deeper look how CYI supports researchers through the IP discovery process. In this four-step process, we begin first, as already mentioned. I will go briefly through this. We raise awareness through different sessions on IP considerations, during the induction session for new hires, different presentations throughout the year that are intended for our internal community. Another way to get informed on the subject is, of course, events like this one today that is provided by the CKTO. And how do we scout for IP? We do it in different ways. One is on one-on-one session with interviews with new hires. We talk to them to understand better their research, their aspirations, their passions, their challenges, anything there is that we need to know. Also, we try to identify key exploitable results through projects and also through informal or accidental casual talks and discussions. And once we identify that there is something that possibly can be protected, there is an evidence of IP, we try to see in what ways to protect it and commercialize it. And the first step is that you submit an IDF to our office. So next, once we get this document, we start the evaluation process, first internally and then through the IP advisory committee. And ideas are being evaluated based on their patentability and commercial potentials. We also assess factors such as the novelty of the idea and the market relevance. In addition, we provide, as Konstantinos said, services such as ownership assessment, reviewing agreements from projects and collaborations for different IP considerations. We then perform IP landscape to understand what else exists out there. For example, which technologies or part of technologies have already been covered and what are the IP rights that are out there. Once the above are confirmed, we then proceed with different IP strategies, strategies for protection, ensuring that the invention is legally safeguarded and that you have the go ahead to commercialize. And last but not least, we also support negotiations in that are involved in the different technology transfer agreements. At this point, I would like to highlight how important it is that you disclose inventions early on, so that we can help you navigate the different complexities. Using the IDF forum, we try to evaluate the IP ownership. And IP ownership tries to define who has the rights to the IP, how is this IP managed, used, and shared in different endeavors, projects, agreements. And this helps us come up with different decisions as to how to best protect it. Now, once the first two steps, first part are in place, we then begin to think about commercialization and how and to who to provide this. And now a brief glimpse into our IP portfolio, which is steadily growing with numerous patents already filed. And we have 8 new patents that are underway. So we have 4 filed, 1 in the national phase. We have different other submission for different type of technologies with multiple applications for different industries. And here we have a couple of notable examples. One of these is a method that amplifies the exergy of thermoclines. What does this mean is the method focuses on improving and amplifying the efficiency of thermal energy storage systems, making them more cost-effective and efficient as well. Currently, this is in TRL 3, Technology Readiness Level 3. The invention also has been benefited from the IP services provided by the CKTO, which covered also the IP landscape and the associated cost. So this is another pattern, and it's a novel model method for generating high purity, finely dispersed nanoparticles using inductive heating. This is a breakthrough for industries such as pharmaceuticals, automotive, material science, and energy. So now, for these technologies to have real impact, we need to put them, like previously mentioned, in the hands of those who need this. And there are different ways that this can be further exploited that can be mutually beneficial. Let's look now at different ways that commercialization can happen. I might be repeating some of the things that were previously mentioned. Nevertheless, I have to cover this. So while patents are critical for safeguarding IP, the journey doesn't stop there. The true value of a patent lies in its ability to facilitate tech transfer. And like I said, you need to put these important technologies in the people, in the industries, in the companies that really need it. And this can be done in different forms. One, as a service. However, the services that we provide here, they first need to be further refined as a complete offering that you can provide then to anyone who might need it. Licensing. With this, you can create one or several license agreements. As the IP owner, you can provide further rights through licenses to others to use your invention. Another option, selling the IP, but then this is one time off, it doesn't belong to us anymore. And of course, in certain cases when there is big commercial potential and growing market, and the technology is very novel and it's it needs a specialized knowledge, then you can create a spinning off company. And one such example of a spin-off is Nanomicron, who is a perfect example of how the Cyprus Institute IP framework works in practice. Now, this endeavor started back in 2018, and it came through a project that was an infrastructure project that allowed the development of advanced technologies. And then Professor Biskos, who you already heard previously, developed a new method for nanoparticles characterization. This novel inductive heating generator for aerosol-based nanoparticles, it's much superior than other currently existing alternatives in the market. And this invention became the foundation, the focus of Nanomicron. So what was the next step? Professor Biskos realized that there is a huge potential. He contacted the IDD office, and with the office help and advice, it made sense, since this is a platform technology with different applications and can have also derivative products, that he creates a spin-off to further advance and develop the technology in order to bring it to market. What he did next is he leveraged the expertise of external partners through the IP booster, where they did a landscape assessment and a market assessment to see the commercial potential. And once this opportunity was, the opportunity of this invention was realized, the next step was to file for a patent. And this patent ensures the protection that nanomicron needs to exist and operate. And of course, to get further funding. What else? Of course, with that, nanomicron also benefited from the RIF programs, where they submit an application and got a grant, the pre-seed grant, to further refine their offering. And through that, they are one step closer to making a real impact. And this is it. But I want to conclude, and I want you to take a few takeaways from this. First, I want you to remember that we provide full support in a structured way, from education to IP protection. And the sooner you disclose an idea, the sooner it can be protected, especially before you publish something. And with that, you also avoid the risk of jeopardizing your rights. IP is not just protection, it's also a tool that enables innovation, business growth, and it creates impact. And as a technology transfer office, as an innovation office, we are here to help you navigate this journey by providing you guidance and the right tools to protect your inventions. So this is all from me. Please get in touch. We would love to hear from you, have a coffee, have discussion, and explore further how we can commercialize, or anything that you wish to discuss in that regard. So thank you so much.